Today we are talking about using your mind as a portal to a new dimension as we continue to read The Gateway Process, a declassified CIA document outlining different dimensions and how to use the brain to access different levels of reality. This is going to be really good. We're taking a look at tuning, clicking out, what these dimensions are, and according to this document, how one can access them, and then we're going to explore that idea just in general. It's going to be very, very good. I'm excited to talk about this with you guys. Real quick, I want to remind you, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It helps out a lot. And if you enjoy my work, consider supporting on Patreon. You get access to new secret videos, members-only videos, every single week. Helps out a lot. Also, as a reminder, there are a lot of scammers in the comments saying that I have a WhatsApp or a Telegram. They're just trying to pose as me or something. Don't fall for that. I'm never going to contact you and tell you to join a WhatsApp or a Telegram. That's a bunch of scams. Also, be aware that there are a lot of people out there spreading misinformation and disinformation about us. So they don't want information that we talk about to get out. So be on the lookout for that. A lot of BS going around. All right, my friends, here we go. How to use the mind, or using the mind as a portal. So last week, what did we talk about? If you didn't see the video last week, that's fine. Last week, we talked about what these different dimensions are, and I will give you a very, very quick recap. And let me bring up the book, because the book right here in this section, it's not the book, I'm sorry, the document, this declassified CIA document says intervening dimensions. Since the absolute is conscious energy in infinity, that is without boundaries, it occupies every dimension to include the time-space dimension in which we have our physical existence, but we cannot perceive it. It overlays everything, as do many of the intervening gradients or dimensions through which the energies of the universe pass on their way to and from their home in the state of infinity, that is the absolute. And then it says to enter these intervening dimensions, human consciousness must focus, etc., etc. And that's what we're going to be talking about, how the mind is a portal to these dimensions. But real quick, before we talk about that, I just want to give you a refresher on what that little portion there meant. Okay, so let's talk about how we understand existence to be. There is the source, then there's the frequency domain, and then there's the holos. The source is the pure source. It contains all the basis frequency waves that are necessary to produce reality. And then the holos is the physical domain that arises from the interference pattern of those frequencies. So in a nutshell, you can think of reality, of the physical world, as being an internal hologram. What's an internal hologram? It's a dream that's produced by a frequency pattern from the frequency domain, which ultimately stems from the source. So once again, I want you to just use this as a little example. So the reminder is how holograms work. So we're going to take a look at how holograms work real quick here. Pretend this is a laser pointer. Pretend this is a holographic plate, or, just holographic film that contains embedded within an interference pattern. And so if you take the laser pointer and shine it on the holographic film, and then you were to look at it, you would see a three-dimensional image. So you have three different things going on. You have the source, the laser pointer, you have the film, which has the interference pattern, and then when the laser pointer lights up the film, it produces a 3D image, or the hologram. So reality is a lot like this. You have the source, the frequency domain, and then the space-time domain, which is a projection of that. So you can think of it a bit like a radio as well. You have radio waves, and then you have a radio, and then you have what's producing the radio waves. So you have, the main device that is broadcasting the radio waves, and then you have the radio that tunes into that broadcast, and then you're able to hear the music because you're tuned into it. So what our brains do is tune us in to the broadcast of the physical domain. But there are different stations. Just like how you tune a radio, there are different stations. If you tune the radio, you can tune it to a completely different song. So the same idea goes with how reality works. Right now, all of our radios or brains are tuned into the song of the physical world. That's why we're all experiencing this physical world together and we can interact in it because we're all tuned into the same station. But we have the capacity of mind to tune into different stations. And different stations are different domains. You could say it's like a different dimension. So multiverse isn't true. There aren't an infinity of universes. What multiverse would be like if you had an infinity of radios and every radio could play only the same song but slightly different. That's like multiverse. An infinity of radios, but every radio plays the same song, but every song is slightly different. That's like multiverse. How reality truly operates is like a single radio that has the capacity to tune into an infinity of different stations. So it's actually much different, and it's important to put that out there. So we have the ability to tune into these different stations, or rather to these different dimensions. Now, this is what I mean when I say your mind is a portal to a new dimension. A great example of this is when you go to sleep and dream. When you go to sleep and dream, you're no longer tuned into the domain of space-time, of the holos. You're tuned into your own personal dream world, which are your own internal frequency patterns. So this is the interference pattern composed of all the frequencies of all the minds in existence. Then when you go to sleep at night, you stop tuning into that pattern and you tune into your own personal pattern, the pattern of your own mind. And that pattern of your own mind gets projected internally as a dream world that you can explore. So you can think of human beings as like a radio that can only tune into two stations: the station of the physical world and the station of your own dream world. But there are a plethora of other stations that humanity can gain the ability through the evolution of consciousness and technology to be able to tune into and access. And that's what the main topic is today, is about accessing those different domains and the theory behind that, the mind as a portal to these different domains. And last time we talked about how these different domains arise. They are actually constructed by the collective effort of synchronized minds together, or group minds. You could call them, higher entities. Higher entities have constructed these other domains through their own frequencies. And ultimately, that's what we're going to do as well. Earth is sort of a training ground for us to be able to reach that level where we will be able to construct our own collective dream world, our own CFD or collective frequency domain with its own projected subverse. That's what we will be able to do at some point. We're not there yet. We as humanity, the first step is to develop the ability to tune and understand tuning better. Now, so the document says to enter these intervening dimensions, human consciousness must focus with such intense coherence that the frequency of the energy pattern which comprises that consciousness, that is, the brainwave output, can accelerate to the point where the resulting frequency pattern, if displayed on an oscilloscope, would look virtually like a solid line. Achievement of this state of altered consciousness sets the stage of perception of non-time space dimensions because of the operation of a principle in physics known as Plancks Distance. Okay, so let's take a look and see what this document says about how to access this domain. How to, or these different domains, these various different domains. Now, they call the process clicking out, and they define it in a certain way. We call the process tuning, and we define it in a certain way. So let's take a look and see what they say and contrast it with what we say about reality. So they're going to rely on something known as Planck's distance. So to put it, it's quite an involved subject, but to put it succinctly, Planck's distance is the shortest possible distance. Okay? So this is an aspect of quantum mechanics which applies to the fact that any oscillating frequency, such as a brainwave, reaches 2 points of complete rest, which constitute the boundaries of each individual oscillation, that is, the movement up or down. So what are they saying? They're saying if a wave is oscillating, there are 2 points where it reaches a boundary, right? It's reaching a boundary at the top and then the bottom, because it's changing. So they're concentrating, right? If you're thinking about an oscillating brainwave, they're concentrating on the point where the two boundary points, the top and the bottom. Okay, so without these points of rest, an oscillating wave pattern would be impossible, since the points of rest are required to permit the energy to change directions and thus continue vibrating within rigid limits. They're just saying that these points are necessary to have a wave. If you didn't have these points, you couldn't have a wave, because it would just keep going. It would not be a wave. Those points are required for what a wave is. But it's also true that for an infinitesimally brief instant, that energy reaches one of its 2 points of rest, it clicks out of time-space and joins infinity. This critical step out of time-space occurs when the speed of oscillation drops below 10 to the negative 33 centimeters per second, Planck's distance. To use the words of Bentov, Itzhak Bentov, quantum mechanics tells us that when distance go below Planck's distance, which is 10 to the negative 33 centimeters, we enter, in effect, a new world. To return to our case in point, the human consciousness wave pattern reaches such high frequency that the pattern of clickouts comes so close together that there is virtual continuity in it. Then a portion of that consciousness is actually postulated to establish and maintain its information collection function in those dimensions located between time, space, and the absolute. So what are they saying? They're saying that as you have a wave that is oscillating, and because this wave, this point has to change direction at a certain point, and the velocity changes, it's saying that at a certain point that it will go below Planck's distance, because the reason why it's going below Planck's distance is because it's changing velocities as it changes directions. And so they're saying that as this wave oscillates, that in that moment when it's changing direction, when it's going at the boundary points where it's changing directions, they're saying for an instance it clicks out because it goes below Planck's distance. And it clicks out of the physical domain into an intervening domain. That's what it's saying. So basically what they're saying, what one needs to do is increase the frequency so fast that those moments of clickouts becomes almost continuous. So if you have a wave oscillating like this, they're saying that it's going to click out for an instant at every boundary. So it would go click, 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 click. They're saying to increase the frequency so those clickouts almost become continuous. So if you were to increase the frequency, click, 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 and then it would just be continuous. So that's what they're saying that must be done to begin to access these domains. So you have this almost continuous click-out pattern establishing itself in continuous phase at speeds below Planck's distance, but before reaching the state of total rest. Human consciousness begins to pass through the looking glass of time-space after the fashion of Alice beginning her journey into Wonderland. The gateway experience, with its associated hemisync technique, is apparently designed, if used systematically and patiently, to enable human consciousness to establish a coherent pattern of perception in those dimensions where speeds below Planck's distance apply. This holds true irrespective of whether the individual is exercising his consciousness while in his physical body, or he is doing so after he has separated that consciousness from the physical body. That is so-called out-of-body states mentioned below. So here, let me see, I want to explain that better, but let me see how much we're going to read here. Separation. Okay, let me just show you the graph real quick, or the diagram here, where they're showing, I don't know, you probably can't see it very well, but I'll try and blow it up a little bit. It's just showing a wave. It's just showing a very simple wave, and how this section in between here is associated with being in time space or the physical domain, and then the boundary points being associated with an intermediate dimension, a different dimension. So again, essentially what they're saying is that if you have this wave, what they're saying is everything in between is associated with the physical domain, but the very boundary points are for an instant associated with a domain that is not within space-time. So it would be, physical, non-physical, non-physical, so again, if you think of every time I say click, it's when it's going to that intermediate dimension. It'd be click, 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 every click representing having access to that intermediary domain. But of course they're saying you don't notice it because it's so fast. It's just an instant. So you're completely and totally focused on the physical domain. You're not noticing it. What they're saying one should do is increase the frequency of brainwave output so that those clicks become so close together, it becomes almost continuous. So click, 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 and then they're saying consciousness will then be able to switch from its information gathering function from the physical domain to an intervening domain. Now, I have a lot to say about that. Some very, very important things. But real quick, I want to finish reading what they say here. So it says, the dimensions in between. Now that we have postulated the legitimacy of the assertion that the energy forms which compose consciousness can move beyond the time-space dimension, we need to turn our attention to the energy forms which inhabit those dimensions between time-space and the absolute. In doing so, we may better perceive the form that reality assumes when we encounter it in those intermediate dimensions. In this context, Bentov tells us that the causal relationship between events break down, movements become jerky rather than smooth, time and space become grainy or chunky. Perhaps a piece of space can be traversed by a particle of matter in any direction. So they're just talking about, I just want to see if this is really that relevant. It's not terribly relevant. And anyway, you can all read this if you'd like. I don't find it to be terribly relevant to what we're discussing right now. But here's what I want to talk about. Okay, so what about this idea of clicking out? Is this idea of clicking out right? Is it correct? So personally, I like this document. I think it's very interesting. I am skeptical of this particular explanation. I absolutely believe and have experienced the ability of being able to tune to different domains. Is this idea of clicking out correct about being able to focus brain waves in a certain way that it goes below the Planck length and reaches a continuous state? Is that really what's happening? I'm skeptical of this. I think that it's not impossible. I think it could be the case, but I'm very skeptical. I believe that it probably actually works in a different way. I believe that it has to do more with the with bypassing certain filtering mechanisms of the brain. And one could argue that this is a certain way of, say, hacking the brain or trying to get past the filter. But the thing is that we have the ability to tune to different domains. So how do we have the ability to tune to different domains? We're tuned to the physical domain right now. When we go to sleep and asleep at night, we are tuned to the state of dreaming. And then also when one is under the influences of psychedelics, right? Like let's say DMT, one is tuning into a different domain as well. Remember, every time I mention psychedelics, don't do anything dangerous or illegal. But you have these different modes where you can see how the brain is operating. You can see how the brain is operating in the dream state. You can see how the brain is operating in a DMT state. And from what I know about how brainwaves work during the DMT state, during the brainwave state, I have not seen a phenomenon like they are talking about. I think that it would be very conducive to progress for the development of tuning. All right. So we want to develop the ability to tune in a more controlled way. Right now, right now, how do we tune? We tune when we go to sleep at night and dream. We tune under the influence of psychedelics, and we tune in meditative states. Meditative states also allows us to tune. Now, are we increasing the oscillation of the frequency of our brainwave output so incredibly fast that it's almost forming a continuous line in the way that they're talking about? I'm skeptical of this. I think that it probably does not work this way. However, that's not, I could not say that for sure. I think that it is something that needs to be studied, and perhaps we find out, it does work that way. But I have not seen enough evidence related to brain states in dreaming and DMT and different states that would back this up, so I'm skeptical. So how does the process of tuning work in general? Well, the process that tuning works in general, from what we know about reality and how we understand tuning, is that you have the left and right hemispheric functions in the brain. The left hemispheric functions of the brain are very linear, and they are focused on the space-time domain, the physical domain, while your right hemisphere of the brain is associated with the frequency domain and the unconscious. The right hemisphere is really that portal. So when one goes into a meditative state, what you're doing is you are relaxing the left hemispheric function of the brain to allow your consciousness to dive more and access into the right brain hemispheric functions, which is connected to the frequency domain. So you're bypassing left brain function to get to right brain function, which is allowing one to access the unconscious. And through this process, what one does is one wants to switch their conscious attention from the physical domain to space-time. Now, you can think of it a bit like lucid dreaming. When you are asleep and dreaming, you are tuned into your dream world. Now, you are in a semi-conscious state in a dream world. But when you become lucid, you're really starting to transfer your consciousness to that dream state. So when you become lucid, what happens is you realize, oh, I'm in a dream. I'm dreaming right now. I can do anything I want. What's the problem? You usually wake up. Because when you're, the real left brain hemispheric linear processing functions come on, that's associated with self-awareness, you start getting, you automatically want to be pulled and tuned back to the physical domain. But with practice, one can practice avoiding that. There's a lot of different techniques one can do. For example, I've tried different techniques. I forget which book this is described in. Oh, God, I can't remember it. It's back there. But anyway, one of the techniques, for example, is if you feel yourself starting to, you become lucid, you realize you're dreaming. If you feel yourself starting to wake up, what you do is you close your eyes in your dream world, in your dream body, you close your eyes, and you spin around really fast. I don't remember if you're supposed to keep your eyes open or close your eyes when you spin around really fast. I can't remember which. But anyway, this kind of keeps you tuned in to the dream again. And it works. I've tried it. It does. If you start to feel yourself wake up, spin around. I can't remember if you're supposed to close your eyes or not. If you guys really want to know, let me know and I'll look at the book. I just forget. I haven't done it in a while. But it does. And we can't say with 100% certainty why this works, but why it probably works is because your mind is you're basically, because you're spinning around and you become disoriented in your dream, your mind stops trying to wake you up and goes like, oh wait, I have to reorient, and it ties you and anchors you more to the dream world, because your mind is automatically, oh wait, what's going on here? I have to reorient myself and focus. What's going on? I have to fix my perspective. And so your mind becomes more focused on fixing the perspective of the dream world and links you to the dream world and keeps you from waking up and being more focused on the outer world. So that's just an example of how one is attempting to bring one's full self-aware consciousness into the realm of the when one is tuned into another domain, but that it's difficult because as soon as you do that, it wants to direct you to this domain again, but you want to pull back, and there are different methods to do this. And you can think about this in meditative states as well. When you're in deep meditative states and you start, I don't know, how many of you meditate, but if you start to meditate and you start to enter into, let's say, a frequency domain, or you start having a visual experience, you have to be careful to stay calm, because if you get like really excited and you're like, oh wow, I'm seeing this right now, you automatically snap out of it and switch back to being focused on this domain. So your left hemispheric functions, which is really associated with consciousness and self-awareness, really wants to keep you tuned into this domain. Why? Because it's been developed throughout years and billions of years of evolution so that you will survive. Your brain has literally been evolutionarily designed to keep you away from other domains and keep you focused on this one. So it's going to be constantly trying to pull you back to this one like a magnet, and you have to develop techniques and tools to resist. So, that being said, I think that the ability to tune is something that humanity is working on a little bit, but not to a very high degree. But it's something that needs to be taken very seriously as humanity evolves in consciousness and humanity evolves in technology. And I think a great way to begin to explore how the ability of tuning works is to explore dream states and explore DMT states. And I think that that will be very fruitful in understanding how to properly develop the ability to tune in a controlled way. Now, does it work like how they're talking about with regard to clicking out and increasing the frequency of brain output so that it reaches the Planck's distance to an almost continuous fashion? Maybe, but like I said, I'm skeptical. I can't say yes, can't say no. I'm skeptical. I would be inclined to think that that's probably not the case. I would be inclined to think it probably works a different way, but I don't know. And when I don't know something, I'm going to tell you I don't know something. I don't know if that's how it works. I am skeptical if it works that way. However, I know that the process itself does occur. Whether it works that way or not doesn't really matter. Well, I mean, it matters when we want to really develop how to do it in a more controlled way. But as far as the fact that it does work, and the reason why it does work is because we are all inherently minds. Why is the mind a portal to these dimensions? Because these dimensions are frequency dimensions, frequency domains, CFDs, and we are minds, beings of frequencies that has the ability to tune into those particular domains. And so we have the ability to tune into those domains because, like the analogy earlier, we are all, you can think of us, we're all like radios that are tuned into this particular domain right now. But by developing these techniques, we can adjust what we're tuned into to find a whole plethora of other domains. And like I said, our evolutionary trajectory, where we're going as a group, as humanity, is to develop the ability to create our own collective frequency domain. So we'll be able to create our own, you can call it a dimension if you'd like. That's the whole point, is Earth is sort of a training ground for us as beings to no longer need Earth. Now, this isn't escapism, and that's a big difference. And I don't talk about this often because I don't want people to think about escapism. We're not trying to, break the cycle of incarnation and escape because Earth is so horrible. That's not how it works. The way we break the cycle of incarnation is to create a new Earth that evolves in consciousness and technology, with humanity working together so that it forms a subnetwork mind that no longer requires a planet. We call this holos independence or planetary independence. So ironically, everyone who's trying to escape the cycle of incarnation, like right away because Earth is so horrible, that's not going to work. The way you break the cycle of incarnation is by working together, building a new world, learning how to work together as a group and as a collective so that humanity as eternal minds working together can construct their own CFD, collective frequency domain, their own dimension, their own collective subverse, their own collective domain where we can exist in together instead of the physical domain. So yes, we can transcend the physical domain, but it's not about escaping, it's about creating and growing. So it's kind of like, to reach the butterfly, we have to build that cocoon. So to be able to reach the part where we are no longer required to exist in the physical domain, we have to build Earth and create a healthy collective between all individuals. That's what we have to do to be able to get there. People who are trying to just get out right now are sort of like caterpillars that are trying to become the butterfly by and skipping the chrysalis. You have to build the chrysalis. You have to go through the difficulty of breaking it out. You have to go through the process of self-destruction where you destroy oneself, in the chrysalis and become a new being as you break out, and the struggle that it takes to do that. So in order to become this beautiful new creature, this butterfly, in order to reach holos independence and enter into our own new domain, we have to be able to go through that phase of transformation, build that chrysalis, and that entails creating a planetary civilization, creating a new world, a new Earth, a new beginning, a new consciousness, a new humanity for all of us, so that we have the power to collectively transcend. Now, next week, I believe we're going to be talking about perhaps out-of-body experiences and perhaps Tauruses as well, toroidal shit. We'll see. We have a lot to discuss, and it's going to get really good because this document starts to get very, very interesting as it begins talking about the different aspects of the gateway process itself. So, my friends, I hope you enjoyed this. Please like and subscribe. Check out all the other videos in this playlist. And if you enjoy my work, if you ever felt like you've learned something from it, consider supporting on Patreon. It helps out a lot. It's the best way to support my work. You get access to members-only videos every single week. It helps out a lot. And I want to give a big shout out to those who do support, especially Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, Maria, Joel, Fairies of Venus, and Fashida, everyone else. You can also help out by hitting the join button on YouTube right below this video. Thank you very much.